Every day I learn there are things that I should be worried about that I didn't know I should worry about. Returning from a conference in Orlando Friday night, my plane touched down at O'Hare 15 minutes ahead of schedule. You could hear the sigh of relief among the travelers. It is a wonderful, if small, gift to get home a little early after having been away. As soon as the fastened seatbelt light went off, buckles clipped open, and passengers leapt to their feet to pull things out of the overhead compartments to go home. And then we all stood in the aisle. And we stood in the aisle. And we stood in the aisle. Someone behind me said, "Why aren't they moving up there?" And then we stood in the aisle. Finally, the pilot's voice came over the speaker system. "We're having trouble with the automatic leveling function of the jetway. It'll be just a minute." Automatic leveling function? I didn't know there was such a thing. A minute passed, then 5, then 10. People were sitting down, sighing, preparing to bed down for the night in our aluminum tube bed. And the pilot spoke again. "Let me tell you what's happening." He said, "As luggage is removed from the cargo hold and passengers deplane, the body of the airplane gets lighter and lighter. The automatic leveling function on the jetway ensures that as the airplane rises, so does the jetway. Without it, the gap between the airplane and the jetway gets larger and larger." Interesting. He paused and went on. "At this moment, now that the luggage is off, the gap between the jetway and the airplane is 10 inches. We can't let you step off the plane. It's not safe. But don't worry, we'll get you home." I've heard that before. It was a full hour before they let us deplane, after having exhausted every possible solution. And sure enough, when those of us at the back of the plane in the cheap seats got to the exit door, the gap between the plane and the jetway was a full 15 inches. Burly attendants waited on the jetway. First, we handed down our hand-carried luggage, and then they lifted us down onto the jetway one by one. Great. Now when I fly, in addition to worrying about wind shear and engine failure and unruly passengers, I can add automatic leveling function failure to my list. Who knew? Did anybody know about this? Oh, now you can worry too. You're welcome. I was in Orlando to speak at the national conference of a church software development company. I bet you didn't know that existed either. My task was to inspire the convention goers. For my own inspiration, I worked with today's scripture texts, hoping to do double duty with my conference presentation and my sermon this morning, but to no avail. I gave every Remember the Sabbath Day thing I had to 1,000 church professionals and had nothing left for today, until the automatic leveling function failed. Buried in the Old Testament reading's injunction to remember the Sabbath day lay a sentence I had never really noticed before. Not only were they to remember the Sabbath day, remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Oh, by the way, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. What could possibly connect those two statements? God freed you from slavery. Remember the Sabbath. Yeah, so here's where they intersect. The institution of the Sabbath was a big, unprecedented deal. Through Moses, God asked the people to set aside every week a full 24 hours to do nothing but rest. No food preparation, no exercise, no studying, no video games. It must have seemed an enormous, unreasonable request. Who could bear it? And why would they want to? The why is simple. If God, the Lord and Master of the universe, could finish the work of creation in 6 days and rest on the seventh, so could they. Everyone needs to rest. It levels us. That's the why. If God has time for scotch and a cigar, so do you. But how would they bear it? A whole day. Remember that you were a slave, and I freed you. We tend to forget that, in fact, we control next to nothing. For most of us, living in the most prosperous nation on the planet is an accident of birth. No matter how well we care for ourselves, health issues emerge. Love flourishes, love fails for inexplicable reasons. Airplanes stay aloft more than 99% of the time through no effort of our own. And through all the seeming randomness of our lives, the dumb luck and head-scratching coincidences, there is a constant. God's steady, sure love for us, which is also inexplicable, by the way. In giving the third commandment, God assured them that the Sabbath was not only necessary, but possible. Not because of them, but because of God. The Sabbath is God's automatic leveling function in our lives, in our world, keeping us from stepping too fast, from falling too far. But we fight God's good and gracious intent. We complain the way airplane passengers complain when they can't get off soon enough. But remember, the Israelites didn't free themselves from slavery. The Israelites didn't appoint themselves a light to the nation. The Israelites didn't feed themselves for 40 years in the wilderness. God did all of that in surprising and unorthodox ways. God did all of that for them, in spite of them, freed them, fed them, made them light to the nation. It was all God's doing and not theirs. You can keep the Sabbath, God said. You can keep the Sabbath not because of your rigorous self-discipline or by sheer force of will. You can keep the Sabbath because I will help you. You need to rest, but cannot seem to do so. I will help you to rest because you need to. This shouldn't be that much of a stretch for us. We've been putting our hands in the lives of pilots and the laws of physics for decades. When we board a plane, our biggest worry is that the person next to us not fall asleep and slobber on our shoulders, that the flight attendant not spill a Diet Coke in our laps. The rest of it, wing flaps and flight patterns and altitude control and automatic jetway leveling, all of that belongs to someone else. And we never have to worry about it. But we are more willing to put our trust in aviation than we are in God. Because it is, in fact, excruciatingly hard to trust, to lay down our worry and rest. There was a child on the airplane, many children on the airplane. Most of them nodded off to sleep as soon as the engines fired up, but one child could not sleep, cried and cried and cried for 2.5 hours. It was, as a mother, it was the saddest thing in the world. I wanted to go scoop up this baby, but then they would call the air marshals and throw me out the window, so I decided not to. And I was thinking about that child finally so tired she simply couldn't sleep. We are that child, exhausted, needing to rest, but we cannot. And the gap between God's intent for us and the fact of our busy, restless lives grows ever larger. We get ahead of ourselves. We fall down. We imagine we can do it all ourselves. Until Friday night, I didn't know that jetways level automatically for my unknowing protection. I didn't have to know. And God does the same for us. Levels our lives, calms our fears, slows our pace, guides our paths. Like the pilot on the jet's intercom system, God reminds us, remember how I freed you from slavery? You can trust me on this one too. You need to rest. I'll take care of things while you do. So now we have one less thing to worry about.